Hello, Brookside Church. My name is Jason, and I get the honor of working here. I want to say welcome to the folks in Elkhorn and the Remington campus. Those are online, welcome. And of course, the mods. I want to say welcome to the mods. This is particularly close to my heart. We have mods 4, 8, 19, H, and then the gals in mod 13. When you get out, and if you have an opportunity, swing by Millard campus. I'm generally here. I want to hear what God's doing in your life. Come on by and visit. I would love to see what God's doing. We're going to be talking today about when your life is upside down, when it's messed up, when you're like, and I'm going to use this illustration here, all right? Now, generally, we're rolling through life. Our life is pretty stable, right? You know, we're kind of like, okay, it's all together. You're like, pretty stable, like this triangle here. Like, it doesn't, we're pretty good shape. And then suddenly we're rolling through life, and boom, something hits us. It's a diagnosis, it's our kids are going wonky, it's our marriage is a little bit mess, who knows what it might be. But suddenly we're kind of tipsy, we're a little like, oh no, we're not sure what's happening. We're going to be looking at the life of David, and when his life, going pretty normal, boom, suddenly he was in a cave. He was in a situation where his life got a little out of control. And we're going to learn some lessons from the life of David. We're going to use this as a little bit of an illustration for us. See, King David, if you're familiar with him, he was the king that solidified the nation of Israel. And God used him in a mighty way. But there was a season where he was in a cave. And he wrote that down in his journal. And his journal is Psalm 142. And he wrote that down for us so we can pick up some lessons. So we're going to go over to Psalm 142, and we're going to look at, there's something called a superscription, which is, if you're looking in your Bible, a lot of times it's written a little bit smaller. It's right above verse 1. And that superscription says this: a maskil of David when he was in a cave, a prayer. Maskil is kind of like a literary term. I'm not 100% sure what it means. Then it references King David when he was in a cave. Now, you got to understand the context of this situation. See, David was the second king of Israel. The first king was Saul. But Saul was not a very good king. Saul disobeyed God, walked away from God. And so God said, you know what? I'm done with Saul. I'm going to anoint David as king. So he anoints David as king, but it takes 15 years before David actually takes the throne. And so before Saul dies and David takes the throne. So when you got two kings in a land, there's going to be problems, and they had problems. Saul was very jealous of David. He literally tried to stick him to the wall with a spear and tried to kill him. And so therefore, David had to hide. He had to hide in this cave. All right, I don't know about you. Man, I don't know if you've ever been in a cave hiding from someone trying to kill you. Anybody? I've never had that situation. But I have had situations in my life being a little out of control. I've had bad news. I've had difficulty. I've had situations where my life gets thrown up on its point. I'm like, I'm like, all right, God, what are you going to do? I'm in a cave. And so we're going to learn from David. So our life is not quite right. Man, I want to grow from this. I want to learn. Lesson number 1, we're going to go to verses 1 and 2. So let's look at those real quick, and we'll pick up lesson number 1. 1 and 2 says, I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him, I tell my trouble. So lesson number 1, our caves present an opportunity for desperate dependence. Our caves present an opportunity for desperate dependence. Now, you might be thinking like, well, I don't know if I like that. I'd rather just kind of be my own. I don't want to be dependent on someone. I don't want to be desperately dependent on God, but this is the core of biblical Christianity. This is the core of Jesus' message, right? Jesus said many times, he said, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Blessed are the meek. And there's this assumption of dependence, of falling before God into desperate dependence. And that's what our caves do. That's what these things do when we run into these spots of like, I need you. Notice what David says. Look at verses 1 and 2. He says, I cry aloud with my voice. I lift up my voice for mercy, right? Literally, he's asking God, please, I am in a spot, I need your mercy. I pour out my complaint, he says. It's almost like he's puking his frustrations onto God's lap. He says, tell me, he says, declare. He declares his troubles before God. He's just pouring it out before him. You see his desperation there. And there's something really wise in what David does here. All right, when our life is messed up, when it's out of kilter, it's very wise to find someone to talk to about that and to pour that out before God. And David does that. He pours it out before God, but then he writes it in his journal. And then, in a sense, he's telling us. And so he's going through a healing process. I have a friend who had a tragedy happen in his family, just terrible event with his brother. And just out of that, just the pain of that, he wrote a 15-page just reflection of that, what God was teaching him. He just poured it out to God. And fortunately, David's little pouring out isn't 15 pages. We'd be here a long time. It's only 7 verses. But he pours out his soul before God. He just lays it out. So, lesson from the cave, it's an opportunity to just pour our soul out before God. All right, let's look at verses 3 and 5. All right, and go on to the next lesson. All right, verses 3. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there's no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Lesson number 2, our caves are a good place for soul surgery. Our caves are a good place for soul surgery. When our life is sitting up, man, we're out of control, it's an opportunity to say, all right, God, work in my soul. Change me from the inside out. Notice the shift. 1 and 2 is all about the external, 1 about the situation, right? He's throwing out his complaints, crying out to God. Notice the shift in verse 3. What does he say? When my spirit grows faint within me. It's suddenly a shift from the external situation to what's going on in his heart. That's the hard work. That takes a lot of effort to say, all right, God, what are you doing in my heart? And see, there's a key lesson here. If we are only, when we're in a situation where we're a little out of control, if we are only concerned with the physical pain, with trying to alleviate the physical suffering, we will miss the spiritual lessons, all right? James, there's a book of the Bible, New Testament called James, and it illustrates this. James 1, 2 through 4 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters. Right? That's kind of crazy. Consider it pure joy, David, when you're in this cave. Consider it pure joy when you face that diagnosis. Why? Consider it pure joy, my brothers, because the testing of your faith, what does it do? It develops perseverance, and perseverance goes on, makes us lacking nothing. You see that? See, God uses these difficult situations to do soul surgery. And if we're only interested, now we got to alleviate the circumstances. David had to physically hide in a cave or he might have died, right? The physical was important, but David says, no, I want to do soul surgery while I'm here. And you'll see that shift in verse 3. All right, David does 3 things that I think are helpful for me. Is David identifies, this is what's going on. He identifies the circumstance, the event. And number 2, he identifies what's going on in his heart. That's the hard work. I'm a guy, and I remember I've met with my counselor many times. He go, all right, what are you feeling? How do you feel about that? And I have no clue. I go, I don't know. All right, and so I've been training myself to go, all right, what is going on in my soul? And David is a master of that. As a poet, he wrote down these beautiful, what's going on in his soul. So number 1, you identify the situation. Number 2, you identify what's going on in your soul, but you don't stop there. And that's a good place to get to, but in biblical Christianity, we say, all right, God, what are you teaching me in this? What do you want me to learn? Is there a sin to confess? Is there a promise I need to believe? Right? Then we lay it before God, and that's soul surgery. That's when God begins to root out all that stuff in our life, and he does that. So let's see how David does that. Look at verse 3. Here's what he does. He says, when my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, you have hidden a snare for me, right? So the situation is, he's saying there is a snare for him. People are literally trying to kill him. This isn't theoretical. Literally, King Saul is literally trying to kill him. And so therefore, what's going on in his mind? He says, my spirit is overwhelmed within me, or my spirit is faint. What an interesting way to describe his soul. It's like his spirit needs a drink of water, right? His spirit is like, I need that cold drink. His soul needs that. And so he identifies that, and then he goes to God. What does he say? He says, God, I'm sitting here. If I walk this path, there's a snare for me. Therefore, I'm anxious. He's freaking out. But then he steps back and goes, wait a minute, God. What does he say about God in the middle of that? It is you. It is God who watches over his path. You see what he does there? He's like thinking like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Snare, oh no, he's getting all this. He stops and goes, wait a minute. God knows my path. God's here with me. You know my path. You remember where David started, right? When David was anointed as king? God made a promise to him. You're going to be a king. So God knew his path. God knew okay, so David had to hold on to that. He had to remember that. And we have to do the same thing, right? We go, oh, man, I don't know what's going to. I lay this before you, God. You know my path. You know where I'm going. See, God was doing soul surgery in David because David had to learn these lessons. All right, let's keep going with this soul surgery. Notice in verse 4. Look and see, there's no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for me. And then he says, the low point of the psalm, let me read it again. No one cares for my life. All right, notice the event here. He's talking about no one at my right hand. Now that's a symbol probably as someone for him to want his right hand to go to war with. All right, so David was a warrior. Man, he was a man. He just was used by God to kill a lot of literal enemies. He was a warrior. Remember, he killed Goliath. He killed a lion. He killed a bear. He was just a warrior. But he didn't want to do it alone. He wanted someone at his right hand, right? Let's go, right? We can accomplish, man, we can do so much more. We got someone right next to us says, all right, let's go. And we just go after it. But if we're by ourselves, we're like, you know what I mean? And that's where David is. He's by himself. He's like, and notice what he says. What he says there is powerful. He says, no one cares for my life. Have you ever been there? Maybe you're there right now. I don't know about you. How about online? Have you guys ever been there? Maybe Elkhorn, Mods, Remington. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there now. Place, no one cares for me. I want you to tell you something. That is a lie. And David was believing a lie. Now, it's an honest, he's being honest with his emotion. That's what he feels, but he's believing a lie. That's not true. What do we know about David's life a little bit? Now, David need to remember back. No one cares for me. Who cared for David? Remember, if you rewind, in 1 Samuel 22 is when this happened. You rewind a little bit. Man, there's this guy named Jonathan that stuck his neck out. Jonathan was Saul's son. Jonathan understood his dad was completely off his rocker. And so he says, David, I'm with you. You're not alone. And he was with him, right? David's mom and dad are still alive, right? I don't know about you, but my mom passed away about 5-6 years ago. But my mom always cared for me. His mom and dad cared for him. He was believing a And most importantly, the lie is that he believed, he didn't, the fact that God cared for him. Notice where he goes. Notice where he goes in verse 5. He says, I cry to you, Lord. I cry to you. And that's the personal name God. That's Yahweh. The personal name for God, Abba, Father, is a synonym to that. He's crying out to God. I cry out to you. I feel alone. I feel separate. I feel isolated. No one's at my right hand. Wait a minute, God, you're there. You're at my right. You're with me. Oh, Lord, I trust you. And maybe he's thinking of the attributes of God. He's thinking of God's provision. He's just, oh, Lord, you're there. You are my refuge. See, God's teaching him in this point. He's like, I have no refuge. I'm stuck in a cave. I'm feeling alone. And God says, oh, no. Come here, David. Come here. Let me give you a hug. I'm your refuge. I'm with you. I got you, man. I know you feel alone. That's right where I want you. God reaches in and says, David, I'm your refuge. And then he says, my portion in the land of the living. That's a poetic way of saying, David's saying, in this world, in the land of the living, you're all I need. You're the only thing, they're all I need, right? So David's sitting there, he feels alone. He's like, you imagine his heart rate going up, and he's kind of like, and God's saying to him, David, come here. I'm all you need. We're going to do this. Remember when you defeated Goliath? Oh, yeah. Was there anybody else? Oh, no, you were with me. That's how, yeah. And so God was going to teach him and speak into his soul. He was doing heart-soul surgery. All right, David identified what's going on. He identifies this emotion, what's going on in his soul, and he laid it before God. And that's where God spoke in his truth, spoke in what was going on. So what about you? What about you? Are you alone? Do you feel alone? I just want to speak to that for a minute. Because I have sat in this very room in a group of people next to my own family, and I would have said, I feel alone. I'm alone. No one cares for me. I've been there. That's a lie. You're sitting on your couch right now, you're going, man, I feel alone. That's not true. If you're in this room, you're connected to us, we care for you. You are not alone. God cares for you. The Abba Father says, come here, I want to give you a hug. And you're not alone. Do not believe that lie. Are you in a place where you feel like you feel like there's a snare, people are trying to get you? Are you anxious? And like, man, God meets you there. Okay, do the soul surgery. God cares for you. So let's review real quick. Where are we at? Our caves present an opportunity for desperate dependence on God, right? When our life is like flipped up, we can go, man, all right, I'm desperate for you. Our caves present an opportunity to do soul surgery, right? When we do that soul surgery, right? Imagine we're sitting here, our life gets messed up, and we're thinking, I'm alone. No, God, you're with me. No, God, you care for me. No, God, you're with me. And we begin to turn our life to the, rather than backwards, we turn forwards. We learn from our experience. All right, third lesson. Let's look at the last two verses here. The last two verses in this Psalm, 6 and 7, say this. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. We're going to come back to that. They are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison. That's a good prayer. Memorize that. Set me free from my prison that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. All right, the third lesson we learned from David, our caves help us reset our priorities. When life is going easy, no problems, we tend to kind of get distracted by what really matters. But when it hits the fan, you're like, your priorities get straight. Like, okay. Notice the priority one of David, right? He begins to pray. When our priority of prayer will just suddenly, we start to pray. And that's a good thing, right? That's part of the reason God gives us struggles is so, hey, I will pray. And we begin to cry out, God, I need you. And so the priority of prayer is for David there. But there begs a question that I've been wrestling with is why do we, when we get out of the cave, when our life goes back to normal, we're cruising along pretty easy, why do we stop praying? And maybe that's only me. But I forget. I get distracted. I stop praying. Is that only me? Does anybody else struggle with that? Where you're like, I stopped praying. I was so desperate for God, but now, I'll think about him once a week or so. You right? Notice David. All right, David, you remember now, here he's desperate for God. Remember 2 weeks ago, we looked at the message on Psalm 51? David, now he's in a cave, but then in that psalm, he's up in the palace. He's probably not praying all that much up there. He's kind of he starts to get distracted. And what does he see? He sees, oh, look at that. If David had been desperate in prayer, I think when he had seen Bathsheba, he would have gone, oh, man, no, man, I better come back. You go, hey, honey, we got to find my wife. We got to, And so he would have got himself straight, right? But no, he's kind of he's in the palace now. He sees Bathsheba, and the rest of the story. I think the same is true for us. We don't stay desperate in prayer. And the reason is, I want to give us one suggestion on how to stay desperate in prayer. Notice that phrase, I mentioned it. They are too strong for me. Literally, the enemy David was facing was too strong for him. Remember, he's feeling alone. If he feels like if I get an army around me, man, we can take this on. But he feels alone. He's saying, but David need to remember that, physically they're too strong for you, David, but spiritually as well. And I think that's going to help us stay desperate in prayer if we recognize that spiritually, we always have an enemy that's trying to get at us. And in the flesh, they are too strong for us. But in the spirit, bring it on. We can win. All right, now a couple of verses that illustrate this. John 10:10. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come. Jesus has come, you may have life. All right, there's an enemy that's trying to steal, kill, and destroy. Or consider Ephesians 6:12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against spiritual force of evil in the heavenly realms. David was thinking, man, just in this world, the enemy's too strong for him. David needed to be thinking, and there's an enemy outside of that, a spiritual enemy that is too big for me as well. And then 1 Peter 5:8, be alert and sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. David wasn't thinking about that enemy. That enemy was literally watching David's life, I believe. He was plotting out a course. So then David would live this great life, but then he would fall off the edge at that moment. He was waiting to take David. David never dealt with his sexual immorality. He never really dealt with that, and it blew up for him right there. And so we have to be desperate in prayer because there is an enemy around us all. There's an enemy literally at war right now for our hearts and our minds. All right? What happens this week? Who's heading to school this week? Anybody going to school? Anybody excited about going to school? Woo-hoo! Is there anybody like, oh, I got to go to school? Right? Whatever you're thinking about, however it relates to school, is your reality is you're going into a battleground. There's a war for the hearts of our children. And many times it happens in the context of school. In Timothy, it says that there's literally, demons have doctrines. They have textbooks to try to thwart us and try to steer us wrong. And so let's be in desperate prayer, man, because our children are going to school. There's this enemy that desires to destroy, desires to thwart us off. And so I think we will stay more persistent in prayer if we recognize, this is too strong for me. God, I need you. I need you every hour, right? All right, so what other priority do we see from David? What else does he learn? All right, he returned to the priority of prayer, but notice where he goes. Set me free from this prison that I may praise your name. Right? David is like, set me free from this prison so that you can get the glory. David's priority that God gets the credit, God gets the glory is return to that. When life's going pretty easy, we're like, oh yeah, I got this covered. We kind of think of ourselves, oh, look what I did. And then they're like, boom, we're like, oh no. And we're like, I'm out of control. We go, all right, God, do this work and I'm going to give you all the credit, right? And we give God the glory. And that's what David says. He said, man, God, I just want to praise you. I want to get excited about you. He wants to give God the credit, and that priority of that is part of that. And another element, notice where this ends up for David, right? His priority of community. He returns to a priority of community. Notice where this ends up. I love this imagery. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. All right, he's saying, God, please deliver me from this prison. Then I can praise you. I can give you the glory. Then the righteous, good people will gather around me. Now, David is primarily thinking good people around him so we can go to battle and we can defeat this enemy, right? He's thinking, man, I need some good warriors. I need some good folks that can fight this battle with me. But this imagery of people just, like David gets out of this cave. He's like telling the story of almost, tell me about the cave, man. There was bats, there was snakes, it stunk, And these people gathered around him and he's like, man, they're huddling up. They're like praying for him. So my question is when your life gets turned upside down, when it gets thrown on its point, when you're like out of control, do you have some people that will gather around you? You absolutely need that. We need that. We get that diagnosis on Friday. Who's going to come to our house on Saturday? Who's going to give us a call? Who's going to reach out to us? When it just falls apart, who's going to come close to us and help us out? Do you have that? Now, this is a good time to be looking for that. Shameless plug here. All right, we are in Group Connect season here at Brookside. It's an opportunity to find a group of people that will be around you. Starting this Wednesday, our website, you can go on there and click on the groups, click around. There's a group for everybody. There's an opportunity to get connected because none of us have any idea what's going to face us this week, this year. None of us have an idea of what's coming. We have no idea, but we need some people. I encourage you to get some people that can walk with you. That can, when your life is like out of control. Imagine, back to this illustration, imagine you're cruising along, boom, you get this diagnosis, financially you're a mess, your marriage is rocky, and you're over here, you're like, there's no hope, I feel so alone, and you just pile a whole mess of good people over here. They're going, no, God loves you, no, God's good, and you're like, no, they're going, no. You just pile people, and see how that turns your life and pushes you, right? But if I'm by myself, where do I end up? My negativity. Boom, I go back. But if I got some people around me, fortunately, in my darkest time, I always had people over here. I always had a few people that said, hey, no. Don't go into that hole. No. And push. And I'd fight. Oh, man. But God was faithful. God's faithful to bring and push us forward. We want to move forward in that, you need some people. You need some people to help you. So let's review. All right, what do our caves do for us? They give us an opportunity for desperate dependence. God, I need you. I need you right now, God. And that's a good thing. Don't flee from that, and don't just try to alleviate the physical, because there's an opportunity for soul surgery. There's an opportunity for your soul to be enriched, to be strengthened. And God's doing that. That's hard work, though. I'll be honest with you. I've built a lot of things. I've worked on a lot of things. There's not much harder than soul surgery, because you got to get into this junk of your heart, and that is hard. A lot of times it takes someone to help us. He's doing that soul surgery, and he's working. He turns it over to God. Oh, you're my refuge, Yahweh. All right, and then it resets his priorities. He says, okay, man, you're right. And I think in particular, the lesson for us is there is an enemy that's too strong for us. Let's continue being persevering in prayer. All right, I want to pray for you real quick. I want to pray specifically for a few people, because I am convinced there are some people that are alone. I don't know, I have been in that place of absolute aloneness, and I want to pray for you. Maybe you're online, maybe you're in, one of the campuses, or maybe, I just believe God wants to comfort you. I want you to feel his presence. I want you to feel and understand his. So let me pray for you, and then we're going to worship together a little bit. Father, I just pray for the folks that feel alone. That's a genuine feeling. I understand it. I have been there. I've been a place of no one cares for me. No one even, just absolute alone. I'm sitting around people. I'm surrounded by people, but I feel alone. Father, I just pray for those in this room. Father, just bless them. Like on a hot day when the humidity is just intense, may we feel you like that, ever present. Father, I pray for folks that are online right now that are sitting at home and they just feel so alone. Father, bless them, Father. Help them to feel your presence. Understand, may you show them in your word, Father. And I thank you that we are not alone. I pray against that lie of the enemy. We are not alone, Father. And help the lone people. Just help us to find them, come around them. May you bless those folks that feel alone, Father. In Jesus' name, amen.